The crystalline archives of the Third Spiral Hunting Lodge stretched for kilometers beneath the surface of Centauri Prime, their translucent walls holding millions of hunt records dating back to the dawn of interstellar travel. Krithak moved silently through the empty corridors, 8 primary appendages barely brushing the ground as secondary tendrils interfaced with the archive's ancient systems. As the most accomplished hunter in 5 spiral arms of the galaxy, Krithak had earned the right to access even the oldest records. 2,000 successful hunts across 800 worlds had built a reputation that opened doors most hunters never knew existed. But today, something felt different. The hunter had come seeking information about a particular solar system in the Orion Spur, only to find an anomaly that defied explanation. The gap in the records stood out like a wound in the crystalline matrix. Where there should have been detailed hunting logs, species analyses, and trophy counts, there was instead a simple warning rune so ancient that Krithak's neural translator took several moments to process it. The rune itself was unusual. Not the standard markings for dangerous prey or protected species, but something far older. Krithak's dermis shifted colors rapidly, reflecting inner turmoil. In 8 centuries of hunting, there had never been a species that warranted such a marking. Deadly prey, yes. Challenging hunts, certainly. But this was different. Archive, display full context for warning rune, Krithak commanded, neural tendrils pulsing with curiosity. The crystalline walls hummed to life, projecting a series of fragmented records. Most were corrupted by time, but enough remained to paint a disturbing picture. The species in question called themselves humans. They were bipedal mammals from a Class 3 death world, unremarkable at first glance. Their physical capabilities were modest compared to many prey species. They possessed no natural weapons, no significant defensive adaptations. Yet, as Krithak dug deeper into the fragments, something unprecedented emerged. The records weren't warning about the species' strength or ferocity. They warned about something far more troubling: their behavior. Display earliest hunt record, Krithak commanded. The archive shimmered, producing a data crystal so old its edges had begun to decay. The record within was brief, logged by a hunter whose name had been lost to time. Observation of species 7249C, humans, terminated after 47 cycles. Subject behavior defies all known prey patterns. When exposed to danger signals, subjects do not respond with appropriate fear. Instead, they exhibit signs of curiosity and deliberate approach behavior. Multiple attempts at standard hunting techniques failed to elicit correct prey response. Subjects actively pursued unknown threats for purposes of study. Recommend immediate cessation of all hunting attempts. Krithak's secondary tendrils curled in disbelief. No prey species deliberately approached danger. It defied every natural law the hunter had ever known. Yet here was evidence, preserved for millennia, suggesting exactly that. The hunter accessed another fragment, this one even more disturbing. Third attempt to establish hunting territory near human settlement failed. Subjects detected cloaked observation posts through unknown means. Rather than displaying appropriate fear response, subjects established research facility to study anomalous readings. Standard fear tactics resulted in increased human presence. Situation untenable. Withdrawing immediately. As Krithak absorbed the implications, a new emotion began to surface, one that no accomplished hunter should ever feel: doubt. These fragments suggested something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. A prey species that turned the hunt itself into a subject of scientific inquiry. The hunter's dermis had settled into a deep shade of violet, indicating deep thought. The warning rune's meaning was now clear. It wasn't marking humans as too dangerous to hunt in the traditional sense. It was marking them as something outside the natural order of predator and prey entirely. For the first time in 8 centuries, Krithak felt the thrill of genuine uncertainty. The smart choice would be to respect the ancient warning, to seek prey in safer territories. But the challenge presented by these humans was too intriguing to ignore. Perhaps, Krithak reasoned, the old records were exaggerated. Perhaps the ancient hunters had simply been unprepared for a slightly unusual prey species. How dangerous could one primitive mammalian species really be? The cloaked observation vessel hung silently in high Earth orbit, its sophisticated sensors drinking in data about the planet below. Krithak had deliberately violated 3 different Huntmaster protocols just by entering the system, but the preliminary scans were already suggesting this defiance might be worthwhile. Earth wasn't supposed to be remarkable. A Class 3 death world. Dangerous enough to produce hardy species, but nothing truly exceptional. Yet, as Krithak processed the incoming data, inconsistencies began piling up. The ship's AI flagged another video feed from the surface. Krithak watched as a human female approached a massive ursine predator. Instead of showing appropriate fear, she carried only a primitive image-capturing device, the bear charge. Any sensible prey would flee. Instead, the human slowly backed away while continuing to capture images, maintaining eye contact with the creature until it lost interest. Display previous incident analysis, Krithak commanded. The ship's screens filled with similar scenarios. Humans approaching apex predators. Humans entering active volcanoes. Humans diving into deep ocean trenches. Each incident should have triggered an overwhelming survival response. Each time, curiosity seemed to override basic survival instincts. A new alert drew Krithak's attention. Somewhere in the region humans called Australia, a group of researchers was deliberately collecting specimens of the planet's most venomous creatures. The ship's biology database confirmed these creatures could kill humans in minutes. Yet instead of avoiding them, humans were systematically cataloging them, studying them, even developing countermeasures to their toxins. Krithak's dermis rippled with unease. This behavior pattern matched the ancient warnings exactly, but seeing it firsthand was far more disturbing than reading about it in crumbling records. Analyze human response to unknown phenomena. Last solar cycle, Krithak ordered. The results were troubling. When faced with unexplained events, humans consistently moved toward the source of danger. They formed research teams. They developed testing protocols. They exhibited something unprecedented, methodical curiosity about lethal threats. A particular incident caught Krithak's attention. A human research station had detected unusual radiation from an unexplored cave system. Standard prey behavior would be to avoid the area. Instead, humans had established a permanent research facility. When 3 researchers died from exposure to unknown toxic gases, the humans didn't abandon the site. They improved their protective gear and sent in more researchers. Krithak's secondary tendrils coiled tightly. No prey species behaved this way. No predator species behaved this way. The normal order of nature was to avoid things that killed you. Humans seemed to view death as an acceptable price for understanding. The ship's sensors picked up another fascinating scene unfolding in a region called Florida. A massive storm system was approaching the coast. Most species would seek shelter. Humans were launching aircraft into the storm's heart, deliberately flying into conditions that could easily destroy their primitive vessels. Cross-reference behavior pattern with known species responses, Krithak commanded. The ship's AI processed for several moments before returning. No matches found. Behavior pattern defies standard predator-prey classification models. Krithak had witnessed enough. It was time to test these observations directly. The hunter selected a remote location, far from major human settlements, a region humans called the Amazon rainforest. There, a solitary human was already documenting local predator species. This isolated subject would make perfect prey for initial contact. As Krithak began plotting the descent trajectory, a final sensor alert flashed. The human subject had just been bitten by a venomous serpent. Krithak prepared to log the death and select a new target. But the human's response defied expectation once again. They were capturing images of the serpent, collecting samples of its venom, and calmly administering self-treatment while recording their own symptoms. The hunter's dermis shifted to the deep violet of analytical thought. The ancient warnings suddenly seemed less like exaggerations and more like understatements. These humans weren't just unusual prey. They were something entirely new, a species that had somehow evolved to transform mortal fear into scientific methodology. Nevertheless, Krithak had come too far to retreat now. The hunt would proceed. But for the first time in 8 centuries, the galaxy's most accomplished hunter felt something unfamiliar stirring in their neural clusters. Apprehension. The first sign that something had gone wrong came when Krithak's ship detected a primitive scanning signal probing its location. The cloaking technology was far beyond human capabilities. They shouldn't have been able to detect anything at all. Yet the signal persisted, methodically sweeping the area where the ship hung motionless above the Amazon canopy. Krithak's dermis flushed with irritation as a second scan joined the first. Below, a small group of humans had emerged from the jungle into a hastily cleared area. They were setting up what appeared to be scientific equipment, their excitement evident even from this distance. The hunter watched as they assembled a complex array of instruments, all pointed directly at the cloaked ship's position. Analysis of human detection methods, Krithak commanded. The ship's AI displayed a troubling report. The humans hadn't detected the ship itself. They'd noticed a subtle electromagnetic anomaly caused by the cloaking field's interaction with Earth's magnetic sphere. It was an infinitesimal disturbance, something that should have been dismissed as background noise. Instead, these humans had not only noticed it, but had correctly hypothesized that it indicated something artificial in nature. A third scanning signal joined the first two, operating on a completely different frequency. The humans were adapting their approach, testing different methods to gather data about the anomaly. Krithak watched as they meticulously documented every reading, their primitive devices somehow managing to gather useful information despite their technological limitations. Most disturbing of all was their evident enthusiasm. Through the ship's observation systems, Krithak could hear their conversations. They weren't afraid of what they might find. They were excited. Every new piece of data that suggested something truly unknown was present only increased their determination to understand it. Display historical precedents for prey species detecting cloaked vessels, Krithak ordered. The ship's response was immediate. No precedents found. Standard prey response to unexplained phenomena is avoidance. Current behavior pattern indicates deliberate investigation of potential threat. More humans were arriving now. The initial research team had transmitted their findings, and instead of triggering a panic or flight response, they'd attracted reinforcements. New equipment appeared, more sophisticated than the first. They were establishing a permanent observation post, setting up shelter and power systems. Krithak's secondary tendrils writhed in agitation. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Standard protocol would be to withdraw and find a new hunting ground. But something about these humans' methodical approach was deeply unsettling. They weren't just failing to behave like prey. They were systematically dismantling the hunter's advantage of stealth through sheer persistence and curiosity. A new alert drew Krithak's attention. The humans had deployed some kind of atmospheric sampling device. It was detecting trace elements in the air, elements that could only have come from the ship's propulsion system. They were literally analyzing the ship's exhaust, using it to gather data about its composition. One of the humans, presumably their lead researcher, was now giving instructions to the others. They were setting up a perimeter of sensors in a precise pattern. Krithak's ship analyzed their placement and came to a chilling conclusion. The humans were using triangulation to gradually narrow down the ship's exact position. Through the observation systems, Krithak could hear the lead researcher speaking. "Whatever's up there, it's trying very hard not to be seen. That tells us two things. It's intelligent, and it doesn't want us to know it's here. But the harder something tries to hide, the more traces it leaves behind. We just have to keep looking." Krithak's dermis had turned a pale shade of gray, the color of deep concern. The hunter had come to study these humans, to understand why they warranted such serious warnings in the ancient archives. Instead, the humans were studying Krithak, turning the hunter into the subject of their relentless scientific curiosity. As the day faded into night, the humans showed no signs of slowing their investigation. They'd set up powerful lights and were working in shifts. They weren't going to stop until they had answers. For the first time in a very long hunt career, Krithak was experiencing what it felt like to be the focus of an organized, methodical pursuit. The hunter was becoming the hunted. Krithak had spent centuries perfecting the art of instilling fear in prey species. Every successful hunter knew the fundamental truth. Fear made prey predictable. Fear made them run. Fear made them hide. Fear made them easy to track and capture. But these humans were destroying everything Krithak thought they knew about hunting. The hunter initiated standard fear protocols. The ship's systems generated low-frequency sounds just at the edge of human hearing. Sounds that should trigger deep, instinctive responses. Sounds that had made apex predators on 1,000 worlds flee in terror. The humans' response? They set up audio recording equipment and began analyzing the frequency patterns. Krithak watched in growing disbelief as one of the younger researchers excitedly waved a data tablet. These patterns are definitely artificial. Look at the regularity. Whatever's making these sounds is trying to communicate, or at least trying to get a response from us. The research team's leader nodded, making notes. Let's set up a broader array of microphones. If it tries this again, we can triangulate the source and get the spectrogram running. I want to see if there's any embedded information in these frequencies. Krithak's dermis rippled with frustration. The hunter shifted tactics, using the ship's systems to create strange lights in the jungle around the research camp. Dancing lights, moving in patterns that should suggest a predator stalking its prey. This technique had once caused an entire herd of apex predators on Rigel 7 to abandon their hunting grounds. The humans responded by deploying drones to chase the lights, their cameras recording everything. They split into smaller teams, heading into the jungle with handheld sensors, actively trying to get closer to the potential threat. Their excitement only seemed to grow with each new mysterious occurrence. Unprecedented analysis indicates humans are using fear stimulus as research data, the ship's AI reported. Behavior pattern suggests direct correlation between perceived danger and scientific interest. Krithak initiated the next phase of fear protocols. The ship's systems began manipulating local temperatures, creating cold spots that would move through the camp. On most worlds, this was enough to trigger immediate flight responses. The humans instead broke out thermal imaging equipment and began mapping the temperature anomalies. The lead researcher was practically bouncing with excitement. These thermal patterns are incredible. They're defying basic thermodynamics. Whatever's causing this has technology far beyond anything we've seen. Get samples of the air from those cold spots. There might be trace particles we can analyze. Krithak's secondary tendrils coiled tightly against their body. Every attempt to frighten these humans away was instead drawing them closer, making them more determined to understand what they were dealing with. The hunter watched as they methodically documented each phenomenon, forming and testing hypotheses, gradually building a more complete picture of their observers' capabilities. In desperation, Krithak attempted a more direct approach. The ship's systems created phantom images at the edge of the camp, shifting shadows that suggested something massive moving in the darkness. This technique had once cleared an entire sector of space of its most dangerous predatory species. The humans responded by setting up a perimeter of high-speed cameras. Whatever this is, the lead researcher announced to her team, it wants us to see it, but only glimpses. It's testing our responses. Well, let's show it what humans do when something interesting tries to hide from us. The research camp had now grown to 3 times its original size. What had started as a small team had evolved into a full scientific expedition. Every failed attempt to frighten them away had only provided them with more data, more evidence to analyze, more mysteries to solve. Krithak's dermis had shifted to a modeled pattern that no other hunter had ever seen. The colors of confusion, frustration, and a growing sense of being outmaneuvered. The humans weren't just failing to respond to fear tactics, they were using those very tactics to learn about their hidden observer. As the hunter watched the humans setting up yet more sophisticated detection equipment, a troubling thought surfaced. What if the true apex predator wasn't the one who could inspire the most fear, but the one who had evolved beyond fear itself? As Krithak's ship maintained its deteriorating cloak above the research camp, the hunter began desperately searching through human historical records, seeking some explanation for their inexplicable behavior. The ship's AI compiled incident after incident, each more baffling than the last. In the early days of human seafaring, sailors had encountered massive storms that destroyed their primitive vessels. Rather than avoiding these deadly regions, humans had developed increasingly sophisticated methods to study weather patterns. They deliberately sailed into hurricanes, gathering data that cost dozens of lives, but led to better prediction systems. When humans discovered invisible radiation was killing researchers, they didn't abandon their studies. Instead, they sacrificed their own health to understand this deadly force, eventually harnessing its power. When deadly diseases emerged, human scientists deliberately exposed themselves to infection, meticulously documenting their symptoms as they died, leaving crucial data for others to develop cures. Display statistical analysis of human response to lethal threats, Krithak commanded, secondary tendrils trembling slightly. The ship's screens filled with data. Time after time, humans had encountered something deadly and responded not with fear, but with scientific curiosity. They treated their own casualties not as warnings to stay away, but as valuable data points in understanding whatever had killed them. A particular case caught Krithak's attention. When humans first discovered deep-sea thermal vents, several researchers died horrible deaths from pressure accidents and toxic gases. Instead of declaring these areas too dangerous, humans built better diving equipment. They established permanent research stations in these lethal environments, eventually discovering entirely new forms of life. Krithak's dermis shifted through patterns of distress as the implications became clear. The ancient warning rune wasn't marking humans as particularly dangerous prey. It was marking them as something that had evolved beyond the normal constraints of predator and prey behavior entirely. The ship's AI flagged another historical incident. Early human cave explorers had found passages filled with lethal gases. Rather than avoiding these death traps, humans had developed equipment to analyze the gas's composition. They mapped the toxic caves, lost numerous researchers, but continued until they understood exactly what made these environments so deadly. Cross-reference human casualties versus scientific advancement, Krithak ordered, dreading the results. The correlation was unmistakable. The more lethal a phenomenon, the more resources humans devoted to studying it. They had an almost mathematical relationship between danger and scientific interest. Deaths didn't discourage them. If anything, human casualties seemed to intensify their species' determination to understand whatever had killed their researchers. Through the observation systems, Krithak watched the camp below with new understanding. These humans weren't ignoring their survival instincts. They had evolved something far more dangerous. They had developed the ability to transform their fear into fascination, their survival drive into scientific methodology. A new alert drew Krithak's attention. The humans had just detected an anomalous energy signature from the ship's failing cloak. Instead of running from the unknown energy, they were excitedly preparing to collect readings. Their instruments were primitive, but their methodical approach was slowly stripping away the hunter's technological advantages. The ship's AI presented another troubling analysis. Human scientific advancement appears to accelerate when confronted with lethal challenges. Historical data suggests 94% probability that any hostile action will result in humans developing countermeasures within single-generation timeframe. Krithak's dermis had settled into a deep, uniform gray, the color of profound revelation. The hunter finally understood why the ancient archives had marked humans with that particular warning rune. They weren't just another clever prey species or surprisingly tough predator. They were something entirely new. Humans had evolved beyond the fear response that made hunting possible. They had developed the ability to sacrifice individual survival for collective knowledge. They treated lethal phenomena not as threats to be avoided, but as puzzles to be solved, even if solving those puzzles cost them countless lives. As Krithak watched the humans below preparing another series of tests, a chilling thought emerged. How do you hunt a species that transforms mortal terror into scientific progress? What happens when your prey's response to deadly force isn't fear, but fascination? The answer was written in human history, carved into their scientific achievements with the lives of countless researchers who had died solving nature's deadly puzzles. You don't. Krithak's situation had deteriorated beyond any hunting scenario, encountered in 8 centuries of experience. The human research camp had expanded into a full military scientific joint operation, but not in any way the hunter could comprehend. Instead of weapons, they were deploying increasingly sophisticated detection equipment. Instead of defensive positions, they were establishing research stations. Most baffling of all was the complete integration of military and scientific personnel. Through the ship's observation systems, Krithak watched a soldier carefully adjusting sensitive scanning equipment while a scientist calibrated targeting arrays. But they weren't targeting weapons. They were targeting sensors, spectrum analyzers, and atmospheric sampling devices. Analysis of human military response, Krithak commanded. The ship's AI displayed a perplexing report. The military presence wasn't acting as a security force. They were actively participating in the research. Their combat training was being repurposed for scientific investigation. Their tactical expertise was being used to optimize sensor placement. Krithak watched as a military commander pointed to a holographic display, speaking to the assembled team. The thermal anomalies suggest our visitor's cloaking technology generates significant heat. If we combine infrared tracking with magnetometric analysis, we might be able to establish a real-time model of their ship's position. The lead scientist nodded, adding, "We've also detected trace elements consistent with advanced propulsion systems. The military's atmospheric sensors are more sensitive than our equipment. If we network them with our spectrometers, we could potentially map their engine configuration." Krithak's dermis rippled with disbelief. The humans weren't preparing for combat. They were preparing to conduct the most thorough scientific investigation of advanced alien technology their species had ever attempted. The hunter wasn't facing an enemy force. They were facing something far more dangerous. A species that saw potential first contact as a research opportunity. A new alert drew Krithak's attention. The humans had deployed what appeared to be a primitive communication array. But instead of broadcasting threats or demands, they were transmitting mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and basic scientific constants. They weren't trying to warn the hunter away. They were trying to establish intellectual common ground. Their behavior defies all known contact protocols, the ship's AI reported. They are treating a potential threat as a collaborative research opportunity. Through the observation systems, Krithak could hear the military commander addressing his troops. "Remember, we're not here to fight. We're here to learn. Whatever's up there has technology centuries ahead of ours. Every piece of data we gather could advance our understanding by decades. Stay alert, but stay curious." The scientist added, "If they wanted to harm us, they could have done it already. They're studying us, just as we're studying them. Let's show them what human scientists are capable of." Krithak's secondary tendrils coiled tightly as the implications became clear. These humans had transformed what should have been a first contact crisis into a scientific expedition. Their military forces weren't preparing for war. They were enthusiastically assisting in possibly the most important research project in human history. The ship's AI flagged another disturbing development. Humans are adapting military targeting systems to enhance research capabilities. Combat technology is being repurposed for scientific observation at an unprecedented rate. Krithak watched in growing unease as the humans systematically mapped the ship's energy emissions, thermal signature, and gravitational impact. Their primitive technology shouldn't have been capable of gathering such detailed data, but their combination of military precision and scientific methodology was proving devastatingly effective. The hunter's dermis had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality, the color of dawning horror. Every tool, every tactic, every advantage Krithak possessed was being turned into data for human analysis. The more the hunter tried to remain hidden, the more information they inadvertently provided to these relentlessly curious beings. As night fell, the camp blazed with lights and activity. The humans had established a 24-hour research operation. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to rest. They would keep pushing, keep analyzing, keep learning until they understood exactly what they were dealing with. For the first time in its existence, Krithak realized what it truly meant to be prey, not to a predator, but to something far more terrifying: human scientific curiosity. In the ship's dimly lit control chamber, Krithak reviewed the sum of all data collected on human behavior. The hunter's dermis had settled into a deep, almost black violet, the color of profound realization. The ship's AI had compiled centuries of human history, thousands of research incidents, and countless examples of human responses to the unknown. A pattern was emerging that shook Krithak to their core. Humans hadn't just evolved beyond normal prey behavior. They'd evolved beyond normal predator behavior as well. They'd developed something entirely new in the galaxy's history: the ability to transform their survival instincts into intellectual curiosity. Through the observation systems, Krithak watched a young researcher excitedly sharing new data with her colleagues. They'd managed to detect the quantum signature of the ship's cloaking field, something that should have been impossible with their level of technology. But instead of being frustrated by their technological limitations, they'd simply invented new ways to gather data. "Display evolutionary comparison analysis," Krithak commanded. The ship's screens filled with data. Other species evolved better claws, stronger teeth, harder shells, or faster legs. Humans had evolved something far more dangerous: the ability to override their fear response with scientific methodology. Where other species developed physical adaptations to survive threats, humans developed knowledge. A military officer below was speaking to his team. "Every time they try to hide, they tell us something new about their capabilities. Their attempts at stealth are becoming our greatest source of data. Keep the sensors running. I want to know everything about how that cloaking technology works." Krithak's secondary tendrils writhed in distress as the implications became clear. The hunter's presence wasn't terrorizing these humans. It was teaching them. Every defensive measure, every attempt at concealment, every technological advantage was being systematically studied and understood. "Analysis of human technological advancement rate during crisis scenarios," Krithak ordered. The results were staggering. Humans didn't just adapt to threats. They accelerated their development in response to them. The more dangerous a situation, the faster they evolved solutions. They had turned their entire species' survival strategy into a continuous process of scientific advancement. Through the ship's sensors, Krithak detected something new. The humans had begun broadcasting complex mathematical proofs into space, not just towards the cloaked ship, but in all directions. They weren't just trying to understand the hunter. They were announcing their intellectual capabilities to the entire galaxy. Their behavior represents an evolutionary strategy never before documented, the ship's AI reported. They have developed the ability to transform individual survival instincts into species-wide intellectual advancement. Krithak's dermis rippled with waves of color as understanding dawned. The ancient warning rune wasn't marking humans as dangerous prey or fearsome predators. It was marking them as something that had transcended the predator-prey relationship entirely. They were neither hunter nor hunted. They were observers, learners, adapters. Below, the research team had achieved another breakthrough. They'd managed to create a crude but functional detection grid that could track the ship's position despite its cloaking technology. Their primitive equipment shouldn't have been capable of such sophistication, but they'd simply refused to accept that limitation. The lead scientist was addressing the entire camp. Every mystery has a solution. Every technology can be understood. Whatever's up there, however advanced they might be, they're bound by the same laws of physics we are. We just have to keep pushing until we understand those laws better than they do. Krithak's secondary tendrils had gone completely still, a sign of absolute certainty. The hunter finally understood why the ancient archives had placed that particular warning rune on human records. Humans weren't marked as prey to be avoided or predators to be feared. They were marked as something unique in the galaxy's history, a species that had evolved to turn the very act of survival into a process of discovery. As Krithak watched the humans below continuing their relentless investigation, a thought emerged that would forever change the hunter's understanding of the galaxy. The true apex species wasn't the one with the most advanced weapons or the most sophisticated hunting techniques. It was the one that had evolved beyond the need for either. The species that had transformed the fundamental drive for survival into an endless quest for knowledge. The humans weren't prey or predator. They were something far more dangerous. They were scientists. The end came not with a battle, but with a revelation. Krithak's ship hovered above the human research camp, its cloaking systems failing under the relentless scrutiny of their increasingly sophisticated detection methods. The hunter had one last card to play. A standard escape strategy that had worked on countless worlds. Create a dramatic distraction, trigger chaos, and slip away in the confusion. Krithak initiated the protocol. The ship's systems generated a massive electromagnetic pulse designed to disable the human's equipment and create panic. On any other world, with any other species, this would have triggered an immediate flight response. The loss of technology, the sudden darkness, the uncertainty. These were primordial fears that even the most advanced species couldn't overcome. But the humans didn't run. They didn't even flinch. Instead, Krithak watched in disbelief as they rapidly adapted their non-electronic equipment to continue their observations. The military personnel seamlessly switched to manual tracking methods while the scientists began excitedly analyzing the electromagnetic pulse itself. Remarkable energy signature. One researcher shouted, sketching readings with primitive graphite on paper. The pulse frequency suggests a quantum-level power source. Someone get the Faraday-shielded backup equipment online. We can't miss this data. The military commander was already coordinating the new observation strategy. Deploy the analog tracking systems. If they're trying to escape, they're going to teach us even more about their capabilities. Don't lose sight of that ship. Krithak's dermis had turned completely transparent, a state of pure astonishment no other hunter had ever reported. The humans weren't just refusing to behave like prey. They were treating their hunter's desperate escape attempt as yet another fascinating research opportunity. With no other choice, Krithak began powering up the ship's emergency translocation drive. The hunter knew this final display of advanced technology would give humans even more data to study, but there was no alternative. As the drive engaged, Krithak captured one last image of the scene below. The humans were standing together, scientists and soldiers alike, watching the sky with expressions of pure wonder as the ship's cloaking field finally failed. They weren't afraid. They weren't even surprised. They were documenting everything, their primitive devices recording every detail of the hunter's retreat. As the ship prepared to translocate, Krithak heard the lead scientist's final words through the observation system. Today marks our first confirmed contact with an advanced spacefaring species. They tried to study us in secret, but in doing so, they taught us more about space travel than we've learned in a century. Let's make sure we don't waste a single piece of data they've given us. Hours later, safely hidden in the shadows of a distant solar system, Krithak began composing the official report for the Huntmaster archives. This would be the most important document the hunter had ever created, a warning to all future hunters who might make the same mistake. The ship's AI waited patiently as Krithak's dermis cycled through colors of deep thought before settling into the clear, steady hue of absolute certainty. The hunter began to record. Let this testament stand as the final word on the species known as humans. They are not to be classified as prey, for they have evolved beyond the fundamental behaviors that make hunting possible. They do not avoid danger. They study it. They do not flee from death. They learn from it. They do not surrender to fear. They transform it into scientific progress. In my 8 centuries as a hunter, I have encountered thousands of species across 5 spiral arms of the galaxy. I have seen natural weapons that could shred battleship armor, defensive systems that could withstand stellar temperatures, and predatory techniques that seem to defy physics itself. But I have never encountered anything as terrifying as human curiosity. To future hunters who find these records, avoid Earth and its inhabitants, not because humans are too strong or too clever or too dangerous in the traditional sense. Avoid them because they are something our kind has never encountered before. A species that has evolved to see every hostile action as a learning opportunity, every threat as a scientific challenge, and every encounter with superior technology as a chance to advance their own understanding. The humans are not prey. They are not predators. They are observers of the universe itself, and in their quest for knowledge, they fear nothing, not even the galaxy's greatest hunters.